Now here's Clark again. Oh, through again he goes. He's got Tutu with him. It's Ioane, in fact. Enrico Ioane.
We're going to look at some of the previews of next week's games, a few other things, but we'll start by doing some reviews, I guess, of the week that was. So firstly, we'll look at the Friday night game, which was the Chiefs beating the Force 56-22. So, Rog, mate, I know that's your team. I'll give you the first chance to gloat, brother. Talk us through that one.
Oh, I think it was always going to be one that I can't even remember. Did Damien McKenzie play in that game? I'm going to have to look at the stats here. I know the score, 56-22, looks like it was a bit of a rort in the end. I think on paper they were probably going to be, because they had a couple of players out. I know Leroy Carter wasn't playing on the wing, but you had Sean Stevenson at the back there and fullback. And then I think Caleb Trask was also on the bench for, that's a name we haven't heard for a wee while, brought in. And young Jacob was at 10. So, missing a couple of key players, but Josh Lord, introduction back in, teaming up with Tupou Va'ai. So we had still a good few All Blacks that were playing for the Chiefs, and I think in the end they were just a bit too strong. Real excellent execution. Tupaia was a standout for me again, and I think he'll be someone that will be pushing for reintroduction into the higher honours later on in the year. Narawa, another, one putting his hand up as well to try and claim an All Black jersey again. So heaps to be happy with the Chiefs right across the board. Force try to make it a bit, respectable, putting in 22 points as well. But the Chiefs clear front runners at the moment, not only in that match, but the competition.
Oh, nice, Roger. A bit of a nice humble start there for you, bro. It's not like you there, Roger.
Oh, I just thought, that's, a bit of memory loss too is serving me well at the moment. So I can't remember who was on the team. But that was just something that I do recall.
Yeah. How about you, Joey? I know that you're from, that's your neck of the woods these days. Chiefs over the Force, quite convincingly. Did you catch much of that one?
Yeah, I did, and only because of Samsoni Tokeaho.
Yes.
Being his handy game.
How can I forget? Sorry.
There was a huge draw card for me to watch that game in particular. And also to see what kind of a return Wallace Titi would make off the bench. And obviously see what the players are like still in this round of the competition when reacting to D-Mac, who is still currently the top point scorer in the competition at the moment. So yeah, just like Roger alluded to, they did have a dominant performance from what I saw. And, being their first ever performance at the Bay Oval with what was looking like a resounding victory. So well done, Chiefs. And well done, Clayton McMillan. I'm sure you're quietly, humbly proud of the team's performance, and nice to get one in the Bay.
Yep, I agree there. You guys covered most of the main points. I will say I really liked what Cortez Ratimo was doing at 9 there. We talked about the All Black backline, and we were unanimous that Roygaard is the number one halfback in the country. But I think the number 2 is still up in the air. So that was a bit of a timely reminder from Cortez that, he's a quality guy. And he might be the second best halfback in the country. I'm not sure. I like Hotham, but I think he's up there. So 8 tries to 3. Roger, you touched on it. It was quite convincing. And, the Chiefs are like that. They can just blow teams away. And that back 3 that they've got, Stevenson, Narawa, you touched on, Rog, and I think it was Daniel Rona was playing on the wing. They they had a field day out there, eh? So, I think that reflected on the scoreline as well. So the Chiefs looking ominous. They're probably the best team in the comp at the moment and the team to beat. It's a bit of a two-horse race at the moment, I think. But yeah, good thoughts there, boys. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to the next game. We might just skip it. But Saturday night, Reds 35, Blues 21. Joey, mate, I know that's our team, so I'll get you to have the first read on that one. Talk us through what went wrong.
I think, it was a classic case of one, complacency by the Blues after the one win the week before. And, the Reds being a little bit desperate to break their losing streak. And what a side to do it against, the Blues, which they seem to, in some seasons, be both each other's bogey teams. But yeah, a solid home victory for the Reds. I thought fly half Tom Liner played or orchestrated the attack effectively. I think he really contributed to the scoreboard. And, he's working his way up the ladder of top point scorer of the season. They're all pretty much, Damian McKenzie and then Daylight and then the rest in terms of the points. But, who knows? End of the season could be saying another name at the top. I thought the Blues in particular disappointingly struggled to capitalize on, scoring opportunities that they did have. They did have discipline issues. You can't blame everything on the ref. Although I did think the ref at certain points of the game had a shocker. And, was consistent in those shockers in certain parts as well. So, it did hamper their efforts. But at the same time, you can't blame the ref. You've got to blame the fact that you were in the position that you got in and you didn't take control and you didn't dominate. A key player for me was Hoskins Satutu. I think he played consistent to his previous form leading up to that match. He made some significant carries and, he even made some defensive contributions to the game, which I was pleasantly surprised about because, he gets a lot of flack for being an offensive player more than a defensive player. So it was nice to see him putting in the work there on defense.
Yeah, good thoughts there. I can hear a bit of disappointment in your voice, which is similar to my sentiments there. Rog, mate, what did you think there? I know you went the early crow and said the Blues were done about a month and a half ago. So, mate, this probably strengthened your thoughts there.
We spoke about, this home run, even going back several rounds, back to, just post that bye that they had earlier on. They had the Hurricanes in Moana, which got Blues fans excited again because they got a couple of good wins there. But it was the Crusaders and the Reds games that were, the ones that they needed to sort of notch those wins, because that would then launch them into playoff contention. But now dropping both the Crusaders last week and now the Reds, it makes it even more difficult. And I know people could reach for the players that were missing, the injuries, and you had a fair few All Blacks. There's 4 All Blacks that were out in that match. Dalton Papali'i, Caleb Clark, Ofa Tungafasi and Sam Derry, they're out for the season. But then you also got 2 other injuries in Marcel Renata and Rion Paul. But then equally said, the Reds, they had 7 Wallabies out. They've got 7 Wallabies out at the moment. That's Harry Wilson, Liam Wright, Josh Flock, Filippo Dangunu, Matt Faisler, Josh Nasser, and Matt Gibson. So there's a lot of players, it's a battle of attrition going into the deep end of the competition. But what I was disappointed with was, obviously the Blues are in a desperate predicament now, but Tom Liner scores within 3 minutes. In 3 minutes of the game, and that wasn't, it wasn't just against anybody. He muscled up against Mark Teleta and Rico Ioane to score a try. in the first 3 minutes. And that set the tone. The Reds have got their tails up. A few minutes later, Tom Liner puts the ball in the air. Sullivan can't collect it. It sort of bounces back towards the Reds. The Reds, a couple of phases, and they set up in the middle. McDermott out to Hunter Paisami. Paisami holds the ball and does a rugby league. And we see it in rugby union now a lot. You know, a backdoor pass, holding the defense enough to create a gap for I think it was Anderson. Oh, no, sorry, Jock Campbell. So Jock Campbell's able to come through the gap, and it was the two locks, Bia and Tupolotu, who were held up in that backdoor pass. Enough of a gap, then that hesitation creates that gap. But then who's coming up on the inside? It's not Tate McDermott, it's Liner again. And Liner gets the inside ball, support roll, and he scores again. So within 7 minutes, they're on the back foot. It's looking ominous. And so what can the Blues do from there? So, you know, unfortunately for the Blues, they were held up a number of times, you know, and there were some good attempts where they got across the line. Eklund was, you know, disallowed a try because of a great move from the Blues from a line out, but it was deemed to be that Tupolotu was obstructing, or there was a separation in the maul that led to the disallowed try of Eklund. 15 minutes later, Eklund again is held up. Oh no, in the 15th minute, Eklund's then held up by McDermott, you know, just this desperation of defence, because the onslaught was coming from the Blues, but there's just the execution wasn't there for whatever reason. Then Christie was held up. So there was heaps of attempts. They were having good inroads. But then a really turning point in for the Blues, because they were already behind, but the Talea tip tackle on Ryan at the back, and that was off a Satutu, you know, kick downfield, which was giving them a bit of a breather. But then awesome spot tackle from Talea, but just that tip towards the end where he lifted one of the legs, and then that yellow card, as we know, got upgraded to a red card a few minutes later. So just those moments really cost them. Another one where there was a try where, again, the Blues forwards were muscling up, trying to get inroads. Ta'avao supposedly scores just after half-time. Great way to start the second half. But again, it's brought back by the referees. The bunkers seen a bit of a knock-on from Satutu as he gathered that ball around in open play. So, you know, there were some good moments. It wasn't for the lack of trying, but it was just didn't seem to bounce their way. But even in the 51st minute, the Blues were still in it. It was only 14-7 at that time. They were still in the hunt. But then there was a moment in a ruck. You know how your flanker is normally, when you got the old school talk, I suppose. I don't know if they still use it. We weren't using it last year, but I don't know if they still use it these days, Joey. You know, when you've got what do you call the one closest to the ruck? Defending.
Oh, the guard dog.
Yeah. So, you know, you got the guard dog, and you got the next one over, then you got the... So there was a point where the Reds were trucking it up the middle of the field. They'd just gone over halfway, closer to the 22. And I think it was Beer coming in towards the ruck, but Segner should have been the next one out. Tate McDermott's run sideways. He's spotted the gap. Segner's behind Beer. He's not even beside him. He's behind him and almost nudges Beer ahead. But then Tate McDermott, with his speed and his vision, he's taken advantage of that gap, and he scores next to the post. So now we're going with now 2 tries ahead, and obviously conversion to come. And so, again, just those little... but then not long after, you know, Ta'avao was able to... Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, and in that same play, not only was Beer and Segner not aligned, but Ta'avao shoots up, and then that adds to that gap widening for Tate McDermott to take advantage of. I guess what I'm trying to say, there was opportunities for the Blues to come into that game but there was just a few things that were lacking. The knock-on from Rico Ioane not long after that, when there was no one in front of him. It was a great pass. Can't remember who passed it out to him, but he only had one to beat, and it was the fullback, but I think he took a peek, dropped the ball. And then a few minutes later, because of that, Lockie Anderson scores a try. Again, now we're dragging it out. Knock comes on for the Blues, scores a try. And there was some clever play and industrious work from the forwards for the Blues as well, leading up to that. And Segner, again, awesome clean to preempt the player coming across and allowing Knock to take advantage of that gap. And at that time, when Knock scored, it was 28-14. So, just over 10 minutes, they could still come back. But at the same time, it was a hard watch for me. I don't know how you guys felt about watching it, but it just seemed like the Blues just couldn't get out of first gear. Second gear at times, they would show some patience, but Riccatelli's injection into the game was awesome. I know Eklund, I like the style that Eklund plays, but Riccatelli came on with a lot of pace and power, and then that led into Segner scoring that try with a few minutes ago. So, but a bit of explosiveness and patience shown by the Blues, and that's what we became used to from them last year. So they showed it in glimpses, but almost like it was just a little bit too late for them to get across. Where does it leave the Blues now? There's only 4 games left for them with a bye as well. Their bye comes in, I think, week 15, and they finish at home with the Waratahs. So next in line is the Force, Drua, Moana, and the Waratahs at home. So Force at home, then 2 away games. And we know it's tough for teams to win in Fiji. So can they still make it? I know I said weeks ago that their season's gone. But with 4 matches to make the 6, things do look ominous for the defending champions. But knowing the Blues and the personnel that they have, they can. On paper, they can come back and make, there's a glimmer of hope for them to make that 6. But it's a real tough ask for them, given the predicament that they're in.
Yep. Nice thoughts there, boys. Comprehensive analysis. I agree with the overall sentiment. That was that game was a reflection of the season almost. They created enough opportunities. Rod, you talked about there was that they did all the hard work, then there was that disconnected ruck, no try. All the hard work, then Eklund at the last minute he's held up. And they're doing everything right, just those little execution parts at the end that they were getting right last year. They're just not quite getting right. They're not quite nailing the execution part. And that's the difference between winning and losing. They had enough opportunities, like you mentioned, both of you mentioned. It's not the ref. They had enough opportunities to win that game. There was about 3 or 4 try-scoring chances which they blew. So you're right, man. That was a frustrating watch. It was a poor start for the Blues. I mean, I remember I was over at my cousin's house. We had a barbecue, had a few drinks. He's a die-hard Warriors fan. So I turned it over in the 7th minute. We watched the end of the Warriors. I turned over in the 7th minute, like you mentioned, Roger. 14-0 already. We're down. I'm like, holy shit, what happened? And we just never recovered after that poor start. I was like, whoa. Yeah, they just didn't recover from it. So, yeah, the Blues, they've just looked out of sorts all year. In saying all of that, the games you mentioned, Rog, I will mention again, it is the Force this week. Drua, Moana, and Waratahs. Those are winnable games. But we're at the point now where we have to win all of those games to potentially sneak 6th or 5th.
And if they can get a bonus point in there too, bonus point wins, that could be the difference to sneak in.
Yeah. But I think, if you finish 6th, I think you might be... I'll have to check the draw. I think we might be away to either the first place, which will be the Chiefs or the Crusaders. So it could just be scrape in and then get bundled out straight away. So, but yeah, 1 week at a time. It was disappointing from the Blues. It was all there. They've been very patchy. So credit to the Reds, like you mentioned, John. If we've got nothing else, we'll move on. Unless someone wants to say something, or forever hold your peace. The next game, Moana 34. Beat the Drua 15. So, Joey, mate, not sure if you caught much of that one.
Oh, mate, what a game! I mean, I was kind of expecting the draw to be a bit closer than they were, and I wasn't expecting them to actually. Oh, actually, it was on the road, and Drua are known to not play well on the road. So, I guess they save all their big games for when they're playing in Silva or in Fiji. Moana have been going from strength to strength. They obviously had that massive hiccup against the Blues. And it was good to see that they got the W against the Drua. I did think to myself, okay, are they a flash in the pan? Are they just a few games of fluking it? No, they seem to have figured a few things out, especially this season with Ardie there, which is pretty cool. He seems to have a moment of brilliance in every game that he plays for Moana. Not that he didn't with the Canes when he was there, but it's nice to see him being empowered to do whatever the hell he wants with the Moana team, and obviously it's having an effect on the players around him, and they really do want to play to the level that he's bringing as well, and try and match his energy, which is cool. Unfortunately for Drua, they seem to have made a name for themselves as on the trot not. So, unlucky Drua, and well done to Moana.
Yep, I agree with all that. Roger, mate, not sure if you caught much of that one. Moana 34, draw 15.
Yeah, I did manage to catch it. Watched it a bit later after the live, but the first 20 minutes was a bit of a stalemate. They were cancelling each other out. It was a frustrating watch, and you could see the players were frustrated, and it seemed like a bit of a, with all the build up to celebrate Moana Pasifika rugby, being the draw, but they almost cancelled each other out in that first 20 minutes. But Morgan Turanui, who was one of the commentators, former Brumbies and Wallaby, he said it best. It wasn't comfortable, but it was an excellent last hour of rugby between the two teams, because there were so many errors. They were trying to toil for that opening try, but there was a few mistakes. But it was an entertaining encounter at the end, and I believe an outstanding second half from Moana, and both teams showed why they've come close to upsetting some of the bigger teams. Ardie Savea's leadership and outstanding play in and around the rucks, his carries, his try that was disallowed in the end there, where he chipped it ahead. But just those kinds of inspirational moments in the game sort of spurred on not only the players, but the crowd got going. And you can't deny the Fijian Drua and the following that they have. They had, what they said was, there was more Fiji Drua fans in the crowd at North Harbour Stadium than there was Moana. But both teams have got a massive following now, and irrespective of where they're playing, the movement is going strong. Moana were able to do. They nullified the Drua's attack, and in those moments where they were dangerous, they were able to contain them in those very moments, and that's where they were able to then get their tails up and then able to counter and score the tries that they did as well. But I believe Fijian draw, too many errors. We talked about it a few podcasts ago about those execution and the 50-50s and those micro skills that you expect professional players to have. And with the Fijian flair, the contradiction is that you try and balance that out. Even in the post-match interview, Mesu Dolokoto, the captain of the Drua, he mentioned that they got to take it easy, be a bit more patient, less 50-50 balls, hold on to the ball. But it's part of their DNA, the way that Fiji play, and Fiji Drua is no different. So it's getting that balance. But like I said, the micro skills and lack of precision, which was letting them down and unable, was not allowing them to execute. And get the tries that they were getting. But in saying that, the Drua still are up there in terms of defenders beaten. They're coming fourth in the table with 246 defenders beaten. And they also are up there in the top 4 again with the carries, so there's no lack of trying. Drua are also with clean breaks. They got 77, so it's first equal the Crusaders and the Hurricanes with defenders beaten. So they've got some game breakers. We know that they've got that flair, and it's hard to contain at times. But where they're lacking is execution, and they're at the bottom of the table with only 32 tries after 10 rounds. And so that's where execution and Moana on total opposite, they're coming third with 49 tries in the whole competition. And I know it doesn't reflect where Moana sit on the table, but it's because they're losing by, they're still scoring a lot, even though they're losing some games. And to be able to get that win will encourage them and spur them on for the next match that they've got coming in, because now they're chasing 5 wins. They've never won more than 4 games in Super Rugby since their inception. So that'll be interesting to see how they go. But where they've got really good forwards and some of those standouts like Whailangi, Miracle Whailangi, the number 8, whose name escapes me, he's up there in leading the meters as well in carries. So individually, so he's someone to watch, and I think he'll be someone that Ikalitahi will be obviously looking to get into their ranks as well. Otherwise, despite the result, a great show of Pasifika rugby, and I think Ardie summed it up best. When they asked him, how special it was to play with Julian, and Julian, sitting third on the Super Rugby tries at the moment. When he questioned how special it was to play with his brother, he said it's always special when you're playing with your brother, but I've got 23 other brothers next to me as well. And so for me, that it's that leadership style that Ardie has. It's how he can embrace the cause, embrace the team, and inspire those players that are next to him who are not necessarily household names, but he believes in them as if they are, and it's not. And coming from Ardie, that's got to say a lot, and that's what's probably spurring Moana, regardless of where they finish this year. It's going to be one of their best seasons ever.
Yeah, well summed up there, Rog. Yeah, I agree. I've been impressed with Moana. It's taken a few seasons for them to find their feet. You mentioned how many games they've won previously and in previous iterations, and so for them to get a bit more consistency, that augurs well for the future. This win pushes them to 8th, so they're just 2 points outside the playoffs. And again, I'm with you, Rod. Those Lucies that they got, Miracle at 6, he's been the best, the standout 6 all season for me. Ardie, obviously you mentioned, is good again. Their number 8 was good. I like Danny Tuala in the midfield as well. He's quite silky. I'm not sure if they'll make the playoffs, but they've had a good season so far. And if the Blues don't make it, I hope Moana at least does make it. Because that's sort of they're growing on me, man, I will say. So yeah, a good win from them. Keeps them in the hunt as well. Not sure what's happening with the draw on the other end, because they've been in the playoffs the last few years. So for them to sort of be languishing at the bottom, it's a bit of a fall for them. We might have to dig a bit deeper into that, but yeah, they're really struggling there.
I guess the change of the format as well, because the draw made it in the top 8, and I think it was top 8 last year. I could be wrong. Okay. Yeah, it was top 8. So if they stayed with that format, Moana would be, on their way. But now that they've narrowed it down to top 6, makes it a bit tougher. But yeah, you're right. Draw would still be disappointed the fact that they're languishing at the bottom.
Yep. Right, boys, we'll move forward to the next game, a bit of a bloodbath again. Southern Derby there. So Highlanders 10 at home got smoked from the Crusaders 43. So, mate, Joey, mate, did you watch the Southern Derby there?
Yeah, sure did. And true to form and true to, the history, recent history anyway, Crusaders were pretty ruthless. they were clinical and basically suffocated, their mates from South Island. And, it did look like the Landers were hanging in there for about best part of half an hour, but they were pretty much blown apart by the Crusaders once they tightened their chokehold. I thought from a tactical perspective, the Crusaders' rush defense were pretty good to shut down the Highlanders' playmakers before they could even set shape. So, there were only 2 line breaks that were conceded. So that's a testament to whoever is, involved and in charge of the rush D. They were pretty good in the air, I thought. The contestable kicking game was, from Reeves Reihana and Will Jordan was quite complete, I thought, in terms of nullifying, whatever the Landers were able to, the back 3 were able to conjure up. I thought the Crusaders had a bit of good recycled ball by the forwards. They had 7 or 8 phases without any mistakes, and there was multiple times. So that had to have taken its toll on the Highlanders in terms of being exhausted. For me, standout player, I don't know if you guys agree with this one, but my standout player was none other than Reeves Reihana. So, he had 3 try assists. He had a 92% kick and play success rate. And he had the 2 dominant tackles despite being a 10. So I think he has a really bright future ahead of him if he keeps that form up. Not sure if he will prematurely go overseas like certain players have done. But yeah, I thought he was the standout, and good luck to him for the rest of the season. The Highlanders, I thought their issues were, they didn't have a launch pad in terms of the line out. I thought they were quite poor with their support lines. They had 7 isolated ball carries, and they had a number of turnovers, and that's just not on for this level of footy. And I thought the Crusaders were the ones that really finished the game as the dominant team. So, they had a 17 phase facet of play there where the attacking sequence was pretty flawless. It didn't have any errors, didn't have any penalties, and, that's basically the Crusaders stamping their mark as the gold standard, and trying to, I guess, combat or, kick the Chiefs off their pedestal. So who knows? We will see the Crusaders and the Chiefs at the end of the season, but I think Crusaders are definitely putting their best foot forward in terms of, hey, we're here now. We're going to make a real run for the title.
Yeah, well done, Rod. Joey, mate, well said. Rog, mate, anything to add on that one? How did you see that one?
I think Cody Taylor was massive as well in stamping his mark. There was a bit of niggle in their game and a bit of feeling between, obviously, the Southern Derby. But, just, again, they've had a few injuries as well for the Highlanders. Tawatawa Nawai, there was a lot of talk about him towards, the beginning of the season, up until around, a few weeks ago. But I think moving him from, back and forth from centres and wing, I think he's more effective in the centres. He's quick, but you compare him to the wingers that we have and that are out there, I don't think he's as quick for a winger, although he's still quick. But there's guys that could be, a lot quicker. And whether that's because of injuries and lack of personnel that they're trying to put him in, I think Joe Nareki wasn't playing either. Tangitao's out. So I just think he's been really effective, as we all know, in the centres, and especially at 12. When he gets the ball better, when he's closer to the action. But, then he gets given not only number 14, but he's the captain as well. So there's a lot on his plate at the moment, distraction, a lot of hype around him at the time, so the pressure's on for him to perform week in, week out, as he's shown in the beginning. Jake Tiwi, I don't know too much about him, but he was the one that was in at 12, so they preferred him at 12, having Timothy at number 14. Ratumai Vuki Neepkin, sorry. He's had a couple of good weeks the last few weeks as well, but sadly for the Highlanders, only 10 points, 2 tries, and that was in towards the last 20 where they finally scored. And what's encouraging, like you said about Reihana, Joey, is that his strike rate with the conversions and the penalty that he got. I don't know how many kicks he's missed, but going into the deep end of this competition, that's what's really important. We look back at some of the results where there have been some close losses, especially for the Blues, considering the Blues lost 32-31 in round 5 against the Chiefs. They lost 29-21 to the Highlanders. They lost 21-20 to the Brumbies, and penalties and conversions can make a massive difference. And when you got a bit of depth in the Crusader side, as we know, they've got a lot of kickers. You've got Will Jordan standby. You've got Imana that wasn't playing, and you got now you got someone else putting your hand up in Reihana. And I think that's what the Blues are lacking as well. And when you look at the Blues and some of the kicks that they've missed in the last few weeks, and some of those close losses, they lost 25-22 against Crusaders, and we touched on, and I guess a lot can be said about that Crusaders game, because that's where they turned down the points and trying to go for the line out for the try. So those are the decisions that you got to try and make. Are you confident with your kicker? Because some of those kicks, 3 points, but when you're wanting to chase the game, when you're having to chase the game, sometimes you have to try and go for that try. But I guess the personnel that they've got from Hotham all the way to the All Blacks front row, and then the bench, Tamati Williams, you got Scott Barrett. Savea Saifoloi was a name that popped up quite a few times playing in there as well. So, but I like the look of Christian Leowili, who's popping up. He can pop up at 6, 7 or 8, similar to a Peter Lakai, someone that's already played for New Zealand 15. So he's pushing for those higher honours. But man, there's congestion in our Lucies, as we know. But with all that depth that they've got, Siva Reese, Will Jordan, when they're firing, David Havili, who's coming into his own, and after an injury run sort of campaign last year, it looks like they're going to be good. And then this young Ioane Moananu, who comes on for Cody Taylor when required, he's a bit of a gun, real diminutive in stature, but he's quite a powerful, nippy young character. So yeah, I guess 43-10. I didn't expect that, especially after the Highlanders have shown quite a good run this campaign. I was hoping for a closer encounter between them and the Crusaders, but it just, it's put to bed that notion that the Highlanders have arrived and can match the Crusaders, but the Crusaders have just gone into another gear and blown this competition wide, and they're on the tail of the Chiefs. They're letting everyone know that they're here to contend for another title again.
Yep. Remember back to last year, so the Crusaders were languishing near the bottom. You're sort of thinking, given their history, was that an aberration, or are they going to take a few years to rebuild? And it looks like that was just a one-off loss for the Crusaders last year. I'm hoping that last year wasn't the same for the Blues, where they just had a one-off great season and then they're back to being kaya. But you guys, I agree with all you guys' points. I thought you guys made some good points. Ratamaitavuki Neepkins, you touched on, Rog. Good to see him back. He's had a bit of injuries this year, so he hasn't played much, but he was good last year. Does feel like a two-horse race at the moment, with the Crusaders, who were dominant, and the Chiefs were dominant as well. I agree with you, Joey, mate. Will Jordan, he's possibly the best fullback in the world. He was instrumental. And Rivers Reihana as well, who I have in my notes. He was awesome. So he's been the guy who's had a bit of promise for a bit now. It's just good to see him showing his wares. But yeah, Crusaders just way too classy there, as the scoreline shows. So with that in mind, we'll move on, unless someone's got something, to the next game. A potential upset, you might say, depending on how you view it. But the Brumbies 29 lost to the Hurricanes 35. So, Joy, mate, not sure if you caught any of that one.
No, I didn't. Didn't catch that one. I just know that it was a game of speed versus structure, where the Canes had the speed and obviously the Brumbies have the structure.
Yeah, I know that's sort of the Brumbies style. And it can get a bit boring. I know they've been criticised a bit for just sticking to their structures and their forward-orientated game plan. They tinkered with the rules a little bit and the timings to make sure everything runs a little bit faster, make it a bit more viewer-friendly. And the Brumbies have been a bit reluctant to change from their structural style. But yeah, I agree with that. Mate, Rogers, mate, did you see anything in that game?
The Brumbies and Canes?
Yeah.
I think it was, again, going to be a real forward-dominated power battle with the likes of Alaalatoa, leading from the front. But I think, and then you had Raymer, who's, trying to press for higher honours with the Wallabies. And so those two individuals that I just mentioned, their tries were crucial. And it showed a lot of patience with the Brumbies, because in between those two tries, the Hurricanes, were able to score a couple of tries, and that was through Billy Proctor, and then the next try came in at the 28 minutes through Punivai. But the Punivai, and like with Billy Proctor, his introduction into the Hurricanes has allowed for more opportunities out wide, I believe, and Punivai has been able to, gain from that opportunity, with Billy Proctor being able to not necessarily distribute straight away, but he's a good distributor either side, left or right. And Punivai was a beneficiary of his distribution in that 28th minute. But yeah, so Billy Proctor, I think he's had a bit of an injury run as well, so we haven't seen him in Super Rugby for a bit. But I think that's the first time this year that I can recall. Could be wrong.
He got 10 minutes. He got 10 minutes off the bench last week.
Oh, okay. So that's probably why. Oh, yeah. So he's just come back. So he's got a bit more game time started this week. But it was a tight tussle between them, going back and forth. They're almost scoring try for try. Just before the half time, Love's skill grubbers it ahead, regathers, and a quick ball to his left to Naholo. And Naholo's a dangerous winger, and we talk about wingers. So he's a similar mold to Tawatawa Nawai, but he doesn't lose pace when he bumps and steamrolls players, and he's got good explosiveness, and that's where he can come in. And he scored again not long after half time. And again, just power, pace to beat 3 from a pick and go, and that's not even being given the ball in the back line. He's just picking and going, looking for opportunities, similar to what Caleb Clark does for the Blues when he's on fire. Just goes looking for work. Mark Taleta's another one. Picked and go, and he bumped off a couple of players, eluded a few would-be tacklers, and scores for them. But Roygaard was a really impressive player for me as well, where he showed his pace and his explosiveness from the base of the ruck or the scrum, where he's able to hold the defenders or eliminate defenders, especially in that last try where he put Punivai again away after a dominant scrum in the 61st minute. What didn't help the Brumbies was the yellow card in the 58th minute, and that was to Tai Tualima. And so just things like that. But I think, that 35-29 scoreline is a really good indicator for the Hurricanes to try and maintain that form, because up against a great Brumbies team, it wasn't an easy feat for them. But man, awesome result for them, because that elevates them right into 5th place. But when you look at the table, it's congested all the way from Moana through to Hurricanes in 5th place, where only only 2 points separate those 4 teams in that bottom half of the 8. So, the results in the next weeks, in the next month, are going to be crucial into cementing their spot. Because the Force, even though they dropped that game on the weekend to the Chiefs, they're in 6th. So it's going to be crucial these next few weeks. But yeah, that's just my take on the Canes. Billy Proctor, welcome back, and Roy Gard, game changer.
Yep, nice thoughts there, brother. Yeah, I'm with you. That was an important win for the Canes away. So you talk about the congestion in the table. If they had lost, they would be, well down the pecking order. So it was an important win. And to beat the Brumbies away, that's no easy game to win there. So I think that's why I mentioned at the start. I think that was an upset. I don't know the odds, but it felt like a bit of an upset. So a good win from them. I agree with you about Billy Proctor. He was awesome. He's missed so much rugby, so he's only just come back. This is his first, I think that was his first start. But if you look on social media, whatever, look at like Rico Ioane, he cops a lot of criticism. And a lot of the Facebook brigade or the Instagram brigade or whoever you want to talk to, they want Proctor to be the starting third.
Oh, is that right?
And if he keeps playing like this, he'll get an opportunity to grab that starting centre spot. In my opinion, so yeah, I'm with.
But that's it. He's made a lot of noise just from 2 appearances, especially this his first start. He's made a lot of noise, and he's already.
But Rico's been poor, and that's made more noise. So they're trying to find someone else. That's sort of where I think the gist of a lot of the comments on social media that Rico's been poor. Who's the other option? And I know Billy Proctor was part of the All Blacks system last year. I mentioned on our last podcast when we did our backs selections that in the 1 or 2 games he got Billy Proctor for the All Blacks, he got exposed for some of his defensive deficiencies. So that's a work on for him. But you can see, we saw in the game, he's got potential to be potentially the best centre in the country if he's prepared to blow up a bit more. So good on him there. There's nothing else, boys. That's our round review.